By the mercy, wisdom, and justice of God, we have to talk about these Neanderthugs and their natural propensity for violence. For years, the Western mainstream media has shown black people in not just a negative light, but they've shown black people in a villainous light, and dehumanizing them in the process. They've created a narrative in Western mainstream media of black people as being violent, hostile, and unpredictable. Let me show you who the real violent, hostile, and unpredictable people are. And I say the word people very loosely and in quotations. This was in Michigan last month. You literally had a pack of angry wild animals with guns and rifles at the doorstep of their state's Capitol building. There were terrorist groups like white militias there. Here is a female protesting the stay-at-home and cook order, saying she and her protesting cohorts didn't bring the militia into it, and that she talked to some of those militia terrorists, and, quote, that is not their mission at all to scare people. It's to protect people on both sides.
We didn't particularly bring the militia here, but I did get to speak to some of those guys, and that is not their mission at all, to scare people. It's to protect people on both sides.
Okay, first of all, no shit you didn't invite the militia terrorist group. They go wherever they can cause trouble, violence, and terrorism for not getting what they want, like fucking children. And another thing, the Black Panther Party's job patrolling black neighborhoods to protect their families and neighbors from white terrorism fit that description of protecting people. Your militia showing up at the doorsteps of the state capitol building is a terrorist group who practices violence and terror when it doesn't get what it wants. Let me sidetrack you for a few minutes to make a point. In 2006, you had swamp savages from the South cry "shut up and sing" about the Dixie Chicks when the Dixie Chicks rightly and bravely criticized one of the most evil and wanted dirty terrorists in the world, George W. Bush. And with Kaepernick, this white "shut up and entertain us" ideology was in existence. Here's an article from The Observer highlighting decrepit American society when it comes to their animus for justice and treating black people as their equals. Quote, how dare a player get political and show us the flaws of society during a football game? You're paid to play, buddy. You're a thoroughbred. Shut up, show some respect, and get back to work entertaining us. This is America, where sports are for getting drunk, high-fiving, worshipping athleticism that we ourselves don't have, and living vicariously through the athletes with $1 million glamorous lives we want. We don't want politics, and we certainly don't want your anger and defiance shoved in our faces. Racism doesn't exist anymore. We cleared that up when that Martin Luther King Jr. guy was around. So quit your bitching and show some respect to the flag and nation. Okay, so why am I bringing this quote-unquote "shut up and entertain us" subtopic into this discussion? Because suburban and privileged cave peoples like this white terrorist sympathizer needs to shut up, stay in their place, in her case, the kitchen making me ethnic food, and never display your politics. Keep it indoors like your suburban and privileged fetish for BBC. Moving on, to top it off, these insects made terroristic threats on social media, talking about assassinating people and political figures.
And will need federal financial help moving forward. But he is concerned with the messaging coming from some protesters on social media, including threats to assassinate public officials.
It's frustrating to me. These are very serious threats. What can you do about open carry? Very little. Michigan is an open carry state, and people can carry their AR-15s and their AKs. The question is brandishing. You know, you can't threaten, and you can't aim at someone or point or so there's going to be a question about, you know, what's threatening and what's not, and it's a gray area.
First of all, notice how these American prostitute politicians never care about death threats or terroristic threats unless they can benefit from it politically or unless it's made against them or their colleagues. Because you know they care about their lives more than they do yours. For the common man living paycheck to paycheck, or a part of the working class, the U.S. prostitute politicians disregard these threats. But again, if they can exploit the death threat for political gain, or if it's directed in their direction, either specifically at them or directed at their colleagues, that's when they're like, ho ho, you're going too far, sir. The mayor of Lansing, Michigan says, what can you do about open carry? Very little. Michigan is an open carry state. Let me translate for you what he just said. Open quote, we can't touch these Neanderthugs with guns because they share the same skin color as us. And the zombies who wrote these pro-gun laws look just like us and them, and therefore they are untouchable. End quote. Because I guarantee you, Republicans and even Democrats would not act or express themselves as helplessly and vulnerably as this placating Democrat did for those gun and rifle carrying beasts. I don't know what Michigan shit laws are concerning gun rights, but I can tell you that I undoubtedly know that these rights are not shared equally or allowed indiscriminately for all of Michigan's population. I know black people in Michigan do not have the same gun carrying rights. And they're the ones who need these gun carrying rights more than anybody. They're the ones these opioid fiends have murdered and terrorized for centuries, including recent years with Laval Hall, Alvin Haynes, Matthew Ajibade, Thomas Allen Jr., DeAndre Dorsey, Ascari Roberts, George Floyd more recently, and so on. So our second story is from St. Louis, Missouri. This violent tendency of the EWT is constant. More recently, we saw an EWT couple in St. Louis, Missouri, aggressively brandishing their weapons during a Black Lives Matter protest, as protesters were marching for social and economic justice for black people through their neighborhood. The female 61-year-old Patricia McCloskey was walking barefoot while aiming a pistol at the protesters. Her spouse, 63-year-old George Costanza-looking Mark McCloskey, also barefoot, was possessing a rifle. You can hear rifle-carrying Mark belch, "Get the hell out of my neighborhood." The protesters were not only protesting for Black Lives Matter, they were also marching toward the St. Louis mayor's home, calling for her resignation for her dangerous, Joseph McCarthy-esque act of publicizing both the names and addresses of protesters on a Facebook Live video. After the backlash on social media, the EWT couple and their attorneys made multiple attempts and excuses to argue anything and everything under the sun, including that Mark saw one of the protesters wearing body armor and claiming a protester allegedly pulled out a pistol magazine, and that they were trying to protect their family and their house from quote-unquote being burned down, and that the female, Patricia, was quote-unquote protecting her life, despite being publicly outside of the house, brazenly standing on the grass, targeting her pistol at the protesters. Aside from the fact that none of the claims, specifically of being threatened, could be verified or proven, the range and array of arguments sounds both unbelievable and highly disputable. In addition to this, EWTs also have a history of playing the victim, especially after being the aggressors and carrying out hostile and belligerent acts. Subscribe. Each video takes at least 10 hours for me to do, no lie. The least you could do is click the subscribe and like button. Do you agree or disagree with anything I said in the video? Let your voice be heard in the comment section.